Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. I used to love my job. Not just the kind of, I don't mind going in on Mondays love. No, I mean full-on passion. I was the kind of woman who color-coded project calendars for fun. The office lights humming on at 7:45 a.m. felt like a heartbeat to me. I was the head of internal communications at Trident Wave Solutions, and for a while, it felt like I was shaping the very soul of the company. I built our voice from scratch, drafted every company value, every internal email that made employees laugh or cry or stay another year. My job wasn't just words, it was trust. And I earned that trust with every launch, every crisis I diffused with the right tone, every message I crafted that made this chaotic company feel human. But for over 6 months now, I've felt something unraveling, quietly, like thread slipping from a sweater, one loop at a time. It started the night Dylan Carrick, our VP of Operations, pulled me into his office and closed the blinds. Dylan was always buttoned up, too clean to be real, like someone laminated his personality. But that night, he was nervous, sweaty. He leaned across the desk and said, "I need your help with something, delicate." He showed me numbers, dashboards, a pattern I wasn't supposed to understand, but I did. It wasn't criminal, not exactly, but it was dishonest. We were manipulating internal reporting metrics, reclassifying user engagement in a way that made our newest platform appear wildly successful when it really wasn't. It was a play for investor confidence, a temporary optics strategy, he called it. I should have walked out. Instead, I asked questions. Is this even ethical? Does legal know? He gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes and said, "You're the only one I trust with this, Emily. Keep this quiet, just for now." And I did. Because I believed him. Because I didn't want to be the problem. Because I was tired, and he made it sound so simple. Just help shape the messaging. Soften the language. Delay the truth. But the secret sat in my chest like wet concrete. I stopped sleeping. I stopped laughing. At meetings, I found myself looking around the table and wondering who else knew. Most didn't. Some suspected something was off, sure, but only Dylan and I knew the whole picture. At first, he was all gratitude and quiet panic, but now? Now he's different. He walks around the office with this smug assurance, like a man who's bet on something risky and thinks he's won. He talks louder, interrupts people, smirks during presentations like he's 5 moves ahead of the rest of us. And when we're alone, there's this shift in his tone. Like I'm no longer an ally, but an asset to be managed. Once, I brought up concerns about transparency, about long-term consequences. He waved me off with a chuckle. "Emily," he said, "you're thinking too small. This is how the real game works." And just like that, I wasn't his confidant anymore. I was the girl who knew too much and didn't know how to shut up about it. My colleagues haven't noticed the change, not fully. They still see Dylan as the slick leader with the confident walk and the big vision. They don't see what I see, the cracks forming behind his perfectly ironed shirt cuffs. I sit at my desk now, staring at emails that make my skin crawl. I type responses I don't believe in, and I pretend everything's fine. But it's not, because there's a secret in this company, and only 2 people know the truth. One of them's already lying about it, and the other one? She's getting very tired of staying quiet. At first, I told myself it would pass. That maybe Dylan was under pressure from the board, that once the next funding round closed or the platform stabilized, we'd quietly revert everything and no one would get hurt. I just had to hang on, I said. Just a few more weeks. But weeks turned to months. And the temporary strategy turned permanent. What began as creative reporting turned into something darker, something I couldn't justify with tired euphemisms anymore. I started noticing discrepancies, not just in engagement metrics, but in financial data, hidden line items, revenue reclassifications that made no logical sense. I wasn't part of finance, but enough memos passed through my hands to know. We were fabricating a version of the truth that no spreadsheet could ever validate. I dug deeper, late at night, after hours, when no one else was on the network. Quiet searches, private emails to myself. I built a folder, carefully named, encrypted, buried 3 directories deep on my personal drive, where I stored what I found. We weren't just manipulating numbers, we were cooking the books. Black accounting, falsified margins, non-existent customers showing up as new enterprise leads. It was all designed to inflate our valuation, all for the benefit of a handful of executives whose bonuses depended on the next investor call. And me? I was the idiot smoothing the PR edges of a lie. The weight of it made me sick. I remember staring at a draft of a press release I was supposed to finalize, some glowing statement about our record growth, and my fingers wouldn't move. My hands just hovered over the keyboard, frozen, because I knew if I typed even one more word, I was complicit. That night, I stayed in Dylan's office long after everyone else had left. I laid out everything, what I'd found, what I was worried about, what this could do to both of us. He didn't even look surprised. He just leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, and said, "You've always been smart, Emily. That's why I brought you in on this." I blinked. "You said it was temporary." He shrugged. "I said what I needed to say. That's how this works." There was a long silence between us, and then he stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the city like he was in a movie. "You want to keep your job?" he said, still facing the glass. "You want to keep this nice office? Your team? Your salary?" I didn't answer. He turned slowly. "Then you do this. You play the part. You keep writing what I tell you to write, and you stop asking questions." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The message was clear. Protect him, and he'd protect me. Keep quiet, and I could keep everything I'd built. And if I didn't know. Not yet. But I knew enough to be scared. That night, I went home and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for something worth celebrating. I drank it straight from the bottle on the floor of my tiny apartment, wrapped in the kind of silence that feels too heavy to break. There was no reward coming, no promotion, no equity deal. I wasn't being groomed for anything. I was being used. And the only thing keeping me in this job now was fear. After that night, everything changed. Not in the way you might expect. There were no confrontations, no raised voices. Dylan didn't yell. He didn't threaten me outright. He simply started giving me more corrections to board updates, more last-minute changes to quarterly memos that conveniently rewrote underperforming KPIs. He began copying me on internal threads between legal and finance that should never have crossed my desk, forwarding spreadsheets that didn't match what we'd already published. And when I hesitated to act on them, he'd appear in my office, smooth as ever. "Just clean it up, Em. You're the best at this." Every time he said that, I felt something chip away inside me. It wasn't just about spinning a narrative anymore. He was using me to insulate himself, making me the middle layer between his lies and the people asking too many questions. At first, I was still adjusting language. Then I was revising summaries. Then I was fabricating entire breakdowns of data to fit numbers I knew were false. One Tuesday afternoon, he dropped a flash drive on my desk and said, "We're prepping for audit review. These numbers are the official story, got it?" I stared at it for a long time after he left. That little silver rectangle might as well have been a brick of plutonium. It glowed in my mind, even when I shut the drawer on it. I started dreaming about it, waking up in cold sweats, seeing my name on leaked documents, imagining headlines that read, "Trident Wave Executive Fabricated Investor Reports." My face, my career, my life, wrecked for something I didn't even believe in. And then there was my team. They still looked at me like I was their compass. They trusted me. I saw it in the way they asked for my opinion, waited for my nod before speaking in meetings. And I couldn't stand it, because they had no idea what I'd become. They didn't know the documents they were forwarding me were being twisted into tools for deception, and they didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire. I realized something, sitting there one night in the silence of the empty office. I couldn't do this anymore. I didn't want to carry this secret, not just because it was eating me alive, but because it wasn't mine. It was his, Dylan's, and I had been tricked into holding it like a live grenade with no pin. But here's the thing Dylan never understood about me. I don't fall apart when things get hard. I plan. That night, I took out my old notebook, the leather-bound one I used to scribble ideas in when I was first hired. The pages were yellowed and curling, but the moment I flipped to the back, I knew what I was going to do. If Dylan wanted to use me as the barrier between him and the truth, then I'd make sure the truth hit him square in the face. I wouldn't go nuclear, not yet. I couldn't afford to be sloppy. He was too smart, too insulated. I had to be careful, strategic. I needed proof. I needed leverage. And most of all, I needed time. So I started collecting screenshots, mismatched files, voicemail backups. Every inconsistency, every directive that contradicted policy, every email with just enough vague wording to hint at the truth. I saved them all. Not on the company server, of course. On a private drive, offline, secure. Dylan thought he had me cornered, but he didn't realize I was already mapping the exit. Not just for me. For everyone who would be crushed when the truth eventually cracked through the glass tower we were working in. The secret he tried to bury with me? I was going to make sure it saw daylight. And I would do it my way. It happened on a Wednesday. I was sipping stale coffee, half listening to the usual buzz of Slack notifications, when an internal memo slid into my inbox. The subject line was innocuous enough. Pre-audit prep schedule, internal only. But the second I opened it, my stomach dropped. The word inspection wasn't in bold, but it didn't need to be. The memo was from compliance, a random audit, scheduled in less than 2 weeks. My heart started racing. This was it. The one thing Dylan had been hoping to avoid, and the one thing I'd been praying for. Not because I wanted to see the company implode, but because maybe, just maybe, someone outside of Dylan's pocket would finally ask the right questions. I didn't say anything right away. I played it cool, went about my tasks like the professional robot I'd been pretending to be. But inside, everything was shifting. Around noon, he called me into his office. I knew the moment I saw his face, he already knew about the audit. "Close the door," he said, not even bothering to smile. I did. He gestured for me to sit, then leaned forward with his elbows on the desk like a mafia don in a mid-level crime thriller. "We've got some eyes coming in," he said casually. "The usual song and dance. They'll ask questions, poke around, but it's all standard procedure." I didn't respond. I just watched him. He continued slowly. "Now, I know you've got access to a lot of internal documentation, things that might not look ideal out of context." He smiled, tight and cold. "You've always been good at shaping a narrative, Emily. I'm counting on that again." Then he said it. "I need you to be a good girl and clean everything up. Audit safe, no surprises." A good girl. The phrase slithered under my skin like ice. I smiled, or something close to a smile. Nodded just enough to pass. But inside, something snapped. I wasn't going to hide his mess again. I wasn't going to bleach the evidence, rearrange the data, gaslight an inspection team into believing we were ethical. Not this time. I went back to my office and closed the door. Sat at my desk for a full 5 minutes, just staring at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. He thought I'd cave, that I'd obey, that his condescension, his carefully worded threat disguised as a compliment, would be enough to keep me quiet. But I'd made my decision. This time, I was going to tell the truth. Not to Dylan. Not yet. And not to the inspection team. Not directly. But I was going to make sure they found exactly what they needed to find. I spent the next few days pretending to tidy up, updating spreadsheets, formatting files, renaming folders. On the surface, everything looked textbook compliant. But behind the scenes, I was planting breadcrumbs. Strategically highlighted anomalies. Mismatched timestamps that led to deeper folders. Meeting notes with key quotes buried in innocuous-looking PDFs. Metadata left intact. Accidentally preserved versions saved to shared drives instead of local folders. I knew their playbook. I knew how these audits worked, what keywords triggered second looks, what red flags were often missed. And I used that knowledge to make the wrong things look just suspicious enough to draw attention. I wasn't exposing everything, not all at once, but I was making sure the cracks couldn't be painted over this time. The obedient girl he wanted? She was gone. And in her place was someone ready to pull the first thread. The funny thing about lying is how much energy it takes to keep it going. That's why I left the trail. Subtle inconsistencies. A revenue summary that didn't quite match the one we sent to the board. A project code changed just enough to raise a question. I knew Dylan wouldn't double-check. He never had before. That was the thing about arrogance. It breeds carelessness. The inspection team was scheduled to arrive Monday morning. By Friday afternoon, my work was done. Or rather, my unwork. My desk was spotless, files carefully ordered. Everything looked pristine, if you didn't know where to look. I logged off early that day. I told my team I needed a mental health break before the chaos of next week. No one questioned it. If anything, they applauded me for self-care. I walked out of the building like it was any other Friday. But I didn't go home, not right away. I took a walk, just around the block, bought a coffee I didn't drink, sat on a bench and watched the windows of our glass tower from across the street. I wasn't nervous. Not exactly. I just needed to see the place one last time before everything began to shift. By the time I actually got home, it was nearly 7 p.m. I kicked off my shoes, turned on music, lit a candle, and tried to exhale the week out of my lungs. I should have felt empowered, vindicated. Instead, something gnawed at me, a kind of intuition, a tug at the base of my spine. I checked my phone, out of habit. No messages from Dylan, no emails. But still, I felt it. He was going to do something, and I was right. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that Dylan, for the first time in months, decided to actually review the files I'd prepared. Maybe someone spooked him. Maybe someone on the executive floor mentioned a name from the audit team that made his stomach twist. Maybe it was just instinct. But that night, while I was drinking wine in sweats and watching some show I wasn't really paying attention to, Dylan was sitting in his office, opening reports I'd deliberately corrupted, and realizing something was very, very wrong. He wasn't stupid. No, just lazy. But given enough time, he could put two and two together. He knew I'd been acting off lately. Less available, more private. He knew I had access. And now, staring at reports that were just a little too sloppy, too inconsistent, he began to do what powerful men always do when they feel cornered. He looked for someone to blame, and I was the perfect target. By Saturday morning, the trap had already begun to form. I received a single email from Dylan. Short, polite, almost warm. Hey Em, just did a quick run-through of the audit materials. Can we sync Monday morning before the inspection starts? Want to align messaging? The smiley face chilled me more than any insult ever could. He knew. And now, he wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was planning to pin everything on me. I didn't sleep Sunday night. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, watching shadows drift across the walls, my mind spinning through every possibility. Would he wait until after the audit started? Would he call me in for a quiet one-on-one first? Or would he just sit on it and let me twist? But Dylan was never one for subtlety when he thought he held all the power. Monday morning felt like stepping into a storm just before the clouds split open. The office buzzed with the usual nervous energy. The audit team was arriving at 9 a.m. sharp. My team was running over last-minute slide decks, printing copies, fine-tuning every word I'd carefully planted. And me? I walked in like it was just another Monday. I barely had time to set down my bag before Dylan's assistant appeared in my doorway. He wants to see you. Now. I nodded, stood, and walked to his office like I was walking to a guillotine. The blinds were open. The door was unlocked. A stack of papers sat on his desk, and he didn't even look up as I entered. Close the door. I did. He waited a beat, then two, and then he stood up, grabbed the stack of papers, and hurled them across the desk, and straight into my chest. They hit with a dull slap. Some fluttered to the floor. My name was on the top page, right under the words, Internal Irregularity Review. You think I wouldn't find out? He said, his voice low, but trembling with fury. I said nothing. My fingers gripped the edge of the desk. How dare you betray our company? He snapped. You think you're smarter than everyone else? Smarter than me? I blinked once. Slowly. He stepped closer, eyes narrowed. You're done, Emily. Get out. For a second, I didn't move. Not because I was shocked, but because I was trying to process the absurdity of it. The performance. The man who dragged me into this mess now painting himself as the victim. You're firing me? I said, my voice steady. No, he spat. I'm erasing you. He turned to the door, flung it open. Security! He barked down the hallway. Every head turned. The bullpen fell into a stunned silence. My team looked up from their desks. I saw confused faces, half-risen bodies, wide eyes. Robin from IT stood. What the hell is going on? Dylan pointed straight at me. She compromised our audit process. She's been sabotaging internal documents. That's when the room gasped. Robin looked at me. Is that true? I opened my mouth, but I didn't speak. Because I didn't need to. Not yet. I picked up the scattered papers from the floor, turned them over one by one, and dropped them neatly on his desk. My hands didn't shake, but my heart did. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't shout the truth in that moment, even though I could have, because I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of something else. As I walked out, I heard the whispering behind me. She's the last person I'd expect. She was always loyal. She built our internal comms. None of them understood. Not yet. But they would. Because what Dylan didn't realize, what he couldn't see past his own ego, was that he didn't destroy me. He exposed himself. And the story wasn't over. Not even close. The elevator doors closed behind me, but the sting in my chest didn't. I walked out of Trident Wave's lobby numb. No security escort, no dramatic exit. Just me. A tote bag full of everything I hadn't already lost, and a silence too loud to ignore. I stood on the curb for a moment, blinking into the morning light, trying to decide whether to scream or dissolve into tears. Neither happened. Instead, I walked. Block after block, I let the rhythm of my footsteps drown out the echo of Dylan's voice. How dare you betray our company? He said it like a weapon, like a brand. And for a minute, just a minute, it worked. My plan had failed. I knew it the second those pages hit my chest. He'd found the trail too soon. I'd underestimated his paranoia, overestimated my timing, and now I was fired, smeared, erased in a single morning. And the audit? It would be sanitized. My carefully laid inconsistencies scrubbed. My access revoked before the inspectors even opened their laptops. Dylan would charm them with spreadsheets and confidence. He'd talk about miscommunication and internal realignment, and they'd believe him. Because who was I now? Nobody. I went home, turned off my phone, sat on my couch for hours, just watching the shadows move across the wall. Not moving, not crying, just breathing like it hurt. By nightfall, I convinced myself it was over. He'd won. And then, something shifted. A ping. Just past 10 p.m., my old colleague Tina messaged me from her personal account. Did you see this? Audit team's still here. They're asking weird questions. Something's up. I sat upright. What kind of questions? I typed back, my fingers trembling. Tina replied instantly. They asked HR why you were terminated the morning of the inspection. One guy from compliance looked furious, like actually furious. I stared at the screen. They think it's retaliation? I asked. Not just that, she wrote. They said it raises flags, said they need to see the change logs of all audit-related files you touched. Dylan tried to stall. They pushed back. My pulse jumped. Suddenly, the room felt electric. They noticed. They saw what I wanted them to see. Not the files, not yet. But the timing, the audacity. The cover-up disguised as a firing. And now they were digging. I stood, pacing, heart hammering against my ribs like it had just remembered how to beat again. Maybe I hadn't failed. Maybe the story wasn't over. Not if the inspectors kept pushing. Not if the truth had finally cracked the surface. And the best part? I didn't even have to say a word. Not yet. By Tuesday morning, my inbox had become a battlefield of unread messages. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't ready to pick at the wound. But then one name caught my eye. External, formal, precise. Isaac M. Reynolds, vertical bar, lead auditor, vertical bar. Vieira and company subject. Request for conversation. Trident Wave Solutions. Confidential. I read it twice, then a third time. They wanted to speak with me. Privately. Not an interrogation. Not a warning. A conversation. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me still didn't believe it. Dylan had always seemed untouchable, too slick, too practiced. But now, just days after my firing, the audit team had started pulling threads, and it looked like they were finally seeing the pattern I tried to leave behind. I replied within minutes. That afternoon, we met in a neutral co-working space 2 blocks from my old office. Isaac was tall, graying, sharply dressed, but his eyes were kind, not soft, just fair. "Thank you for coming," he said, offering me a seat in a glass-walled conference room that somehow didn't feel claustrophobic. 2 other people were present, a woman from forensic accounting and a man I recognized from Trident Wave's legal department. "Let's be clear," Isaac began, folding his hands. "This isn't a disciplinary meeting. You're not under suspicion. In fact—" He paused, exchanging a look with the forensic lead. "You're the reason we caught it." I didn't respond right away. My throat was tight. "We found several inconsistencies," he continued, "buried deep, files overwritten, version histories edited, reporting timelines manipulated. But the thing that stood out most? The anomalies were clean, subtle, not designed to vanish, but to be noticed if someone looked close enough." Now I met his gaze. "You were signaling," the woman said softly. I nodded. Isaac leaned in. "What we're asking now is simple. Will you tell us everything?" I took a deep breath. And I did. I told them about the night Dylan pulled me into his office 6 months ago, about the first temporary adjustment, the revenue inflation, the engagement numbers, the realignment of user data to fit investor narratives, about the flash drives, the rewritten summaries, the documents sent just minutes before meetings so no one had time to question them. I told them about the morning he threw the papers at me and said, "How dare you betray our company?" I told them I didn't betray the company. I betrayed him. I watched their faces shift as I spoke, not with surprise, but with validation. They already knew. They just needed the context, the human part, the reason the puzzle made sense now. The legal rep from Trident Wave barely said a word, but his face was pale, like a man who just realized the dam was broken and there wasn't a single sandbag left to stop it. When I finished, Isaac sat back, folding his arms. "You've done the right thing," he said simply. "But I didn't stop it," I replied. "Not when I should have. Not before it got this far." He nodded. "Maybe not, but you didn't protect him. You exposed him." And that was enough. As I stood to leave, he handed me a business card. "You may be contacted again, possibly by external counsel." I accepted it without fear, because for the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the secret alone. And Dylan? Dylan had no idea what was coming next. It didn't take long. 3 days after my conversation with the auditors, the storm finally broke. Not quietly, not behind closed doors, but with a company-wide email sent at 8:16 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Effective immediately, Dylan Carrick has been relieved of his duties as Vice President of Operations. Interim leadership will be announced shortly. We remain committed to integrity and transparency as the ongoing investigation concludes. No explanation, no sentiment, just a surgical removal. And yet, I smiled when I read it. Not because I was vindictive, not because I enjoyed watching someone fall, but because the truth had finally done what it always promises to do, surface. I expected silence after that. A clean break. But Dylan wasn't finished. The first message came through a burner number, short, unmistakably him. "You think this is justice? You've made enemies, Emily, powerful ones." I stared at it, heart pounding. Then came another. "You'll be remembered as a traitor, not a hero. I protected you. And this is how you repay me?" That one made my hands tremble. I blocked the number, reported it. But more messages came, through fake email addresses, anonymous texts, even one voicemail, muffled and threatening, where he didn't speak at first, just breathed. Each one was a reminder that narcissists don't fall quietly. But this time, I wasn't alone. The auditors were still on site. Internal legal was now fully activated. And once I forwarded the threats, things escalated faster than I could have imagined. The very next day, Dylan was formally dismissed with cause, his severance revoked, his stock options frozen. A formal statement from Trident Wave's board described his conduct as grossly negligent and demonstrably unethical. But that wasn't the end of it. The audit report triggered an external review from financial regulators. The numbers were too big, the falsification too deliberate, and that's when the legal language changed. Not just negligence, fraud. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I heard through a friend in legal that Dylan showed up to the disciplinary hearing still dressed in his branded Trident Wave quarter zip, as if he could talk his way out of it. They told him he'd be facing a 6-figure fine, possibly more, depending on investor damages. And worse? Administrative charges were being considered. They used the word indictment. When I heard that, I didn't celebrate. I sat in the same coffee shop I used to stop by before work, fingers curled around a ceramic mug, staring out the window at a city that had stopped feeling hostile. For the first time in months, I breathed. Really breathed. Not because it was over, but because I finally knew it wasn't my word against his anymore. It never had been. It was the truth. And it had never needed my permission to win. When I got the email offering me my position back, I read it 3 times before I could even form a thought. It was worded carefully, like everything at Trident Wave always had been. In recognition of your cooperation and commitment to ethical conduct during the audit process. But I saw through the PR gloss. This wasn't just about restoring my title. It was damage control. They needed to show the world that they were capable of doing the right thing. Still, I didn't reply right away. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was how much had shifted inside me. Being fired hadn't broken me. It had revealed everything. How quickly you can be erased. How eager power is to rewrite a story when truth becomes inconvenient. I wasn't sure I could step back into that building and feel anything but bitterness. But I also knew this. Dylan was gone. The rot at the core had been cut out. And in the vacuum he left behind, maybe, just maybe, something better could grow. So I wrote back. I accept the offer, but I come back on my own terms. And they agreed. My first day back felt like stepping into a movie set of a life I'd already filmed. The lobby still smelled like fresh paint and coffee. The same receptionist sat behind the front desk, though her eyes widened when she saw me. The elevator chimed the same, the 19th floor carpet still curled at the corner near the copy room. Everything was the same, except me. I walked through the halls with shoulders squared, heart hammering. Every glance in my direction felt sharpened with curiosity, surprise, confusion. Some people smiled, tentative and warm. Others turned away, as if unsure how to greet the woman who'd brought the house down and walked back in like she owned the place. And in a way, I did. But the truth? It was awkward. I ate lunch alone for the first 3 days. Conversation still dipped when I entered a room. Some people whispered, others openly stared, not out of cruelty, but confusion. They didn't know how to hold what had happened. I wasn't just Emily from comms anymore. I was the woman who stood up, and somehow survived it. But then something shifted. It started small. Tina appeared at my desk one morning with a coffee. Extra cream, just the way I liked it. No words. Just a nod and a quiet, "Welcome back." Robin from IT popped in later that week and said, "If it weren't for you, we'd still be running reports for a guy who didn't know what 2-factor authentication meant." Even Amanda, the junior copywriter who once nervously hovered over every draft she sent me, stopped by to say, "You didn't have to do what you did, but you did, and we noticed." Support trickled in like rain on glass, gentle at first, then steady. And then a new ripple of change arrived. Her name was Layla Grant, Trident Wave's freshly appointed Vice President of Operations. She was everything Dylan wasn't. Direct, composed, disarmingly intelligent. She didn't speak in buzzwords. She didn't charm with false warmth. She listened. Her first week on the job, she held a town hall meeting, mandatory but not formal. No flashy presentations. Just a microphone, a stool, and one sentence that silenced the room. This company doesn't need a rebrand. It needs a reckoning with itself. Then she turned and looked straight at me. If you want to know what that looks like, it looks like her. My name wasn't spoken, but every eye followed hers. She went on. Talked about rebuilding trust, not with policies, but with people. About redistributing decision-making. about transparency that wasn't performative. And when she finished, the room applauded. Not the kind of clapping you hear after a good quarterly report, but the kind that says, maybe we're going to be okay after all. After that, everything moved quickly. Protocols changed. All executive decisions now required dual verification. A new internal ethics committee formed, one that reported directly to the board. Layla met with every department, including mine, and when she sat across from me in that glass conference room, she didn't talk at me. She asked, "What do you need to feel safe working here again?" I told her, and she listened. They gave me back my title, my team. But not just that. They gave me space to speak freely, a platform. I helped revise our internal reporting protocols, created training materials on ethical communication, became part of the new ethics board. And slowly, the fear in the office faded. And in its place, something else began to grow. I still think about Dylan sometimes, what he thought he could get away with, how he underestimated me, how he thought silence would protect him longer than truth ever could. I don't wish him well, but I don't need to wish him anything. Because what I learned, what I now know, is this. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel heroic. It feels like ruin, like stepping off a cliff, unsure if the ground will rise to meet you. But then it does. And when it does, you realize something life-changing. Doing the right thing will never make everyone like you, but it will make you like yourself. And that's the only kind of peace you can't fake.